Travel bans and travel restrictions are being extended around the world as fears over the new coronavirus variant named the Omicron grow. So not only are more and more countries banning travel from at-risk nations, more cases with Omicron variant are also being found in these places. While back home, the rules are becoming more and more complex, even for travel within the country. In the last 24 hours, the states of Maharashtra and Karnataka, for example, have issued their own sets of guidelines for interstate travel. The union government has its own set of guidelines. And in fact, a war of words of sorts have started, with the union government now writing to the Maharashtra government to ask for uniformity. Now, what are these guidelines? These guidelines will essentially mean that for all international travelers, you will have to, along with your vaccination, have a negative RT-PCR test and then land at the airport and test again. Even if those tests come in as negative, you have to go in and quarantine at least for 7 days. In Maharashtra, they've gone one step further, and even interstate travelers, even along with their vaccination certificates, have to have negative RT-PCR tests. In some cases, for at-risk countries, the quarantine can be as high as 14 days, even if the test negative. Now, there are two schools of thought. Is this the bare minimum required to ensure that Omicron doesn't spread rapidly in the country, or are we overreacting? We're exploring all angles, and today joining me on this are Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, Executive Chairperson, Biocon. Ajay Awtaney, founder of LifeFromALounge.com, is speaking with us. Dr. Shashank Joshi, part of the Maharashtra Covid Task Force, is with us on the show, as is Rajiv Mehra, President of the IATO. So welcome to all of you. And thank you so much for speaking with us today. Ms. Shaw, let me begin by getting your take, because you've tweeted about this, you've put it out on social media today, talking about how you think it's quite overstretched and we're overreacting in a way. Can you explain why you feel that way?
I just basically responded to the protocols that we are coming out with in terms of how we are going to deal with passengers arriving from overseas. Which I felt was a bit of an overkill, because whilst I agree that, testing on arrival is important, I think doing mass testing at an airport anyway puts even uninfected people at risk. And so I feel that just testing people and tracking them and dealing with the positive responders is the way to do it. I mean, subjecting negative, tests to a further quarantine, I think, is a little bit of an overkill. More than anything else, Tamanna, I feel that we've had many, many months of, working out a preparedness planning exercise in terms of how do variants, respond to vaccinated people. Now, I think that it's important that we first garner a lot of information on vaccinated and unvaccinated people vis-a-vis these variants. And by the way, the Omicron variant is not the last. You're going to keep having newer and newer variants. But, shutting down and stopping, everything and having these travel bans is not going to stop the spread of the virus by any means. Personally, I believe we need to focus on vaccinating our populations, coming out with treatments that deal with anyone who turns positive. I know that we are ourselves partnered with a company called Adagio Therapeutics, and they themselves have reported that their antibody drug is actually neutralizing the Omicron variant. So I think we need to have a good strategy in how to deal with this disease. But, just having travel bans is not going to stop the spread. This is not like a Al-Qaeda terrorist who has to be stopped at the borders. It's not about homeland security and border security. This is a virus, for God's sake. And so you've seen it. The Delta virus was supposed to be contained in India, but today the major variant in the world is a Delta virus. And remember, the Delta variant. And remember, even today, even though South Africa reported the Omicron variant, we know that, Europe has already reported this. And today's news says that this variant has been around for weeks. So the discovery of a new variant takes place, several weeks after it actually manifests. So, you're trying to shut the door after the horse has bolted, that the stable door after the horse has bolted. So I just think that we need to be a little more sensible and deal with this in a very different way.
Well, having said that, the fact is that we have responded by even postponing the resumption of international flights into India from 15 December till further notice. Dr. Joshi, I'd like your view on this, because in the eye of the storm are also some of the very stringent measures that Maharashtra in itself is putting into place. And then the BMC locally wants to put in stringent measures because they're saying that there's so many international travelers coming into Mumbai. Do you think these are justified, or is it, as Ms. Shaw says, overkill?
I think, Tamanna, first I want to clarify that circular yesterday doesn't hold true. So there is no domestic travel RT-PCR needed. Number two, there is no quarantine for people who are arriving from high-risk countries. Exceptionally, the only people who get quarantined are people who arrive symptomatic, who test positive on the airport. And the third group is people who have indirectly traveled directly from South Africa, where there is community transmission. Rest of the world, there is no community transmission. There are sporadic reportage of cases. So with the exception of Africa and certain African states, there is no quarantine apart from symptomatic cases and positive cases. So let me clarify that. Number two, the home quarantine is for 7 days. And if somebody tests negative after 7 days, there is no need for home quarantine, whether you are in the risk country or non-risk country. And number three, for domestic travel, there is no RT-PCR requirement. I think people are being safe and they are being strict on border control. At the same time, as Kiran ma'am said, we don't have to go for overkill, but we need to be vigilant. We can't be complacent either. And whatever Government of India has given those guidance, we should follow them in letter and spirit both. So as long as that is adhered to, that is reasonable. I think one thing is there, that most of the Omicron control is going to, it's an airborne droplet virus. So double masking, ensuring that there is proper air ventilation, ensuring that the vaccination program is completed. And if somebody is symptomatic, then immediate testing is done, self-isolation is done, and treatment is given. That is the core. And I think we are already at the end of the second wave. The Delta and the Delta derivatives are on the extinction mode, except for some geographies where it has become endemic. For example, I am reasonably certain that in Mumbai, we are reporting every day 250, 300 cases. So Delta has become endemic here. Only thing is, if there is a new variant of concern like Omicron, by the time it will hit the shores of India, it will take 6 weeks to 12 weeks. And in the meanwhile, we should be cautious and we should not be complacent. That is all.
Okay, but Dr. Joshi, one minute. Let me. No, that is fine, and that is the evergreen sort of advice ever since we've come to identify with what is now coronavirus. But the fact is that these guidelines were issued. They have now been, as you're informing us, pulled back because the central government issued those guidelines. And it's not about singling out Maharashtra. Countries around the world, as well as states, as well as central governments, are first moving to restrict travelers or put in more restrictions and conditions on those who are coming in. The basic question is that 18 months after we've known of COVID-19, is this the only way? Is this the square one that we have to fall back on? Because if this is an airborne virus, then how do we know that someone who boarded a flight as a negative patient did not catch it during the flight? Is that the basic concern?
That is quite correct. Yesterday, somebody came from London and one passenger tested positive on Mumbai airport. So the people, that patient obviously got quarantined, and there were people who were 3 rows ahead, 3 rows behind. They were tested and they were quarantined as a way of abundant precaution. So you see, you will have to take steps step by step. But I think we should not go for overkill. At the same time, we should not be complacent either, because otherwise what will happen is, the main thing is that the mistake we made between the first and second wave, we should not make now. We need to be vigilant, but we don't want congregation. We don't want crowds. My biggest worry today is the airports will become testing labs and there will be congregations on the airport and they'll become transmission zone points. And that will become a seat of transmission. So we want to avoid that also. Yesterday in Delhi also, there was almost a 6-hour queue. So during that time, we have to ensure there are HEPA filters on board. There is a proper air in circulation. So we need to be vigilant. Also, the banning countries is also not correct. People have the right to travel across the world, but we need to be careful. Remember, India also was isolated, no? When we were at the peak of Delta, we could not travel anywhere. Even now, just now, some restrictions are being lifted out. Otherwise, we were like an isolated island. Except for 2 or 3 countries in the world, we were completely isolated by the world. So that is a wrong step. And similarly, now people are doing it in South Africa. That is not correct. But at the same time, one has to be cautious. I think right now, the initial reaction was an overreaction. Right now, people have understood that the early signs are mild, as the South African experts are telling. But gradually, it takes another 2 to 4 weeks to know the clinical outcomes. We need to understand how the virus, which we saw biologically, behaves inside the human body. Does it cause worse lung disease? Does it cause more patients on ventilator? What is the mortality rate? All that will be known in 3 months. We are only in the 3rd week of the disease. I have tweeted also on this that probably this may be a milder variant and maybe a little less virulent. But that is my personal opinion.
No, so we have to wait to know. We have to wait to know. But you know, the broader issue over here is how the world reacts to new variants, which, like Ms. Shaw said, this is not going to be the last one. That we know for a fact. Ajay Awtaney, your take on how the world has reacted. South Africa has said that they are being punished for being transparent. The World Health Organization has come and said travel bans don't work. But nevertheless, a domestic populace is thinking that why should we take risks? Because look at it in India. We've been through hell and back in this year with the second wave. Nobody wants another version of that coming in, even if it at the cost of a few international travelers.
Hi, Tamanna. Good to be back. Couple of things, over the past weekend or the past 5 days, actually, various countries have started to slam the door on South Africa and South African nations where the pandemic, where this variant was first discovered. So I can recall 10 countries at the top of my head, which include, Europe, the US, and UAE, Qatar. Many countries have basically closed their doors to arrivals from South Africa, Botswana, and various other countries which are neighbors to South Africa. Therefore, they disclosed in good measure the fact that there was a new strain on the loose. It does not mean that this strain was first conceived there. It was just something that was discovered there. Now, coming to the Indian reaction, it has been very, very, I can side with the fact that test and trace should be the kind of mechanism that should go on and go forward. But like Dr. Joshi said, and like Ma'am Shaw said, the problem is airports are not places that are built for holding on to 1,200 or 2,000 or 5,000 people. They're made to move people. They're not places which are made to hold on and constrain people. So if you're not going to be able to create systems where people are able to get out of the airports quickly, that is going to be a breeding ground for community transmission. We've seen this in wave 1. We've seen this in wave 2. This has been the way the virus was cut loose. So even if we need to, even if we have to kind of get down to testing each and every person, we need to perhaps create a system where people are taken outside the airport to some sort of a, holding area, which is spacious, and then do these tests. Hong Kong has done this. Other countries have done this over the past year and a half, where massive tents are erected, and that is where the testing happens rather than, putting people in a very confined area. So, but yeah, we are not the first country to require strict measures. The US will be changing the requirements. I have it on good record that the US will now require T-1 day negative reports, which is something that they plan to notify tomorrow. Other countries will also be working on getting more requirements. So this is just the beginning. This is not the end of the health circus, as sometimes I call it, because of Omicron. So we got to watch out.
So Rajiv Mehra, what does this do to the travel and tourism business, which had just about started reviving? I mean, I'm thinking international travelers who have a choice, who are maybe traveling for leisure or for business, may not choose to spend 6 hours at an airport anywhere in the world, then go in for 7 days of quarantine or 14 days of quarantine, depending on the state and the country. On top of that, spend big bucks on negative RT-PCR tests. They'll say, just let's postpone it, just delay it. Are you already seeing the impact of that?
You see, first of all, the most important thing is that the e-tourist visas have just started on 15th of November. Their scheduled flights were supposed to start from 15th December. We are on the bubble system at the moment. Now, no tourist would like to stand for 6 hours for a test and then go into a 7-day quarantine, which is, we are now seeing that whether it is just for the trickle, some people from Europe who was booking for India or for from UK, they have cancelled their tour, or rather postponed till March. So it is not a healthy sign. And what I have been saying is that you have to do your homework properly at the airport, and that is all. If there's a test done from boarding and you have a final vaccination certificate with you, do a RT-PCR test at the airport and let him go. You can't have quarantines for everyone. And it is not, and no one is going to travel like this. So the airlines will again shut down. They will not come. So we have to be very careful. Do the test. There was a report that they will do random tests. Fine. Some very high risk countries, like some people said South Africa or some other countries in the African continent. Fair enough. You test them and have a limited kind of a situation. The entire world is not affected by that immediately. And what we are now hearing is that it is not that dangerous what the Delta variant was. Secondly, when talking about Maharashtra for the domestic ones, there's a circular saying that domestic passengers require RT-PCR test to come. There's a circular. And my friend here said, no, there is no. It is not. There is a circular.
No, but it's been withdrawn.
It has been withdrawn, sir. It has been withdrawn long time back. There is there is no domestic testing required. Also, there is no institutional quarantine except for symptomatic patients or positive patients.
That's fine.
Or from Africa.
Yeah. You see, the thing is that at the airports, I was traveling, I will not name the airport. There were hardly any checking. Hardly any checking. Just checking your temperature and that was out. But if you find anyone with any symptoms or the crew reports, the crew plays a very vital role. That we appear that this person has some symptoms, please do check him. Fine, do it. No. You see, the risk, the safety of the nation is first. There is no doubt on that. But that does not mean that the tourists, the bread and butter of the tourism trade, whether it's hotels, transport guides, who have no business for the last 20 months, with no government support at all. What do you expect them to do? There have been so many suicides in the travel trade because of that. So my saying is that please be vigilant on those coming from abroad, have their tests done. They should be carrying fully valid certificates, RT-PCR tests from there on arrival and let them go.
You know what is most astonishing? You know what is most astonishing and a bit disappointing really, and let me come to Ms. Shaw on this, is that we are going back to the same questions and concerns and the blocks we had over a year ago, where the same question was there more than a year ago, year and a half ago, where we didn't know what to do. Do you think that we have failed to find a protocol even after so many months of living with COVID-19? Because like you said, this isn't the last variant. So the snap fallback decision is, let's ask people to home quarantine. Now, if someone's coming for a business visit, say to Delhi from another country, they can't home quarantine for 7 days. So we have not found a way to test accurately and quickly yet and to make sure it doesn't spread. Do you think we're moving any closer to finding a solution? Otherwise, we'll just be in this vicious circle?
Tamanna, unfortunately, this pandemic has actually not allowed us to learn any kind of lessons with which we can be prepared. Before the vaccines arrived, okay, it was the only measure available to us were lockdowns. But everyone kept sort of reassuring us, saying that once vaccines arrive, this will change. And that once we get our populations vaccinated, we can basically start opening up. But now it appears that we are still not there. And with every new variant, we seem to want to again lock down. So I'm of the view that look, every variant is going to spread around the world. And that's where I have my problem with the kind of protocols and the kind of drastic measures we are taking to responding to any new variant. Why can't we get the data fast? I mean, first and foremost, I'm sure with the number of cases there are in South Africa and in Europe, I'm sure a quick analysis can be done to see how many of those which are infected by the Omicron variant have developed severe disease, and how many of them were vaccinated and how many of them were unvaccinated. I think the moment you have this data, I think you can quickly get into a very different kind of a protocol. And I agree that, it's very unfair on travelers who actually have taken all the pains of being vaccinated, tested, traveling for hours together to now land up and be told that, oh, by the way, now you have to home quarantine, now you'll have to institutionalize, etc., etc. It's important to be safe. It's important to be vigilant. But equally, I think we do need to, as a world, really come out with sensible protocols that deal with any of these variants. Because as I said, this is not the last variant. And are we going to have the same knee-jerk reaction of shutting down everything with every new variant that is reported? I don't think we should do that. And, I know for a fact that the South African doctor who reported the variant himself has said, or herself has said, that look, I see that most cases in South Africa are mild. And South Africa is very poorly vaccinated. So if that is the case, then we need that data to show that this is not such a virulent, lethal variant. And maybe it's a better variant than the Delta variant, because Delta was definitely devastating. But by all the lockdowns we had in the world, did we stop the spread of Delta is the question I'm asking. I don't think we did. Are we going to stop the spread of the Omicron virus by all these shutdowns? I don't think we are going to do that. We need to live with and deal with this virus and its variants in a very pragmatic way. And to me, it is really about making sure you have vaccines, making sure that you have treatments that can deal with positive patients, and making sure that we adopt the COVID appropriate behaviors, like, for instance, the masking and the distancing and avoiding the sort of crowded clustering that takes place during festivals and other events. So we need to be cautious for sure until we absolutely have a green signal that things are under control. But right now, I think just keeping on dealing with more and more lockdowns is not the answer.
So what is the answer? It's a question that administrations around the world are asking. Till we have more efficient testing, till we know more facts about the Omicron, perhaps this chaos will continue. It is bad news for travelers, especially with the festive season around the corner, the year-end travel around the corner, as well as for a nascent travel and tourism industry which had just about shown signs of revival. Let's hope for the best as we wait for more details on Omicron. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the discussion this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.